Hello, my name is AJ Goldsby. I'm a life master from Pensacola, Florida, and I wanted to bring you today, I'm recording game number 6. This is game 6 of the recent FIDE World Championship match played in Chennai, India. Viswanathan Anand is white and Magnus Carlsen is black. This was a critical game because Anand had just lost in game 5, and I think he was looking to strike back as quickly as possible. And so he hit Magnus Carlsen really, really hard as quickly as possible. But something didn't work out for him. And we're going to try to see if we can't determine exactly what some of the good moves and bad moves were in this game. I'm not going to make it a real long video. I'm going to try to keep it relatively short, 10 to 15 minutes. If you need to, there's online analysis. You can always check out one of those. And also, I'll leave a link to the ChessBase article, and you can download their analysis for free. And that's pretty lengthy, and that pretty much covers all the bases. And I'm also going to touch on a few what I consider to be the most important points. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into the game. Again, Viswanathan Anand is white, and Magnus Carlsen is black. This is Game 6 of the World Championship match held in Chennai, India, in November of 2013. Game starts off E4. E5, knight of 3, knight c6, bishop b5, and of course Carlsen, he's playing his absolute favorite. He strikes back with the Berlin defense. If you know anything, in game 4, Magnus played this and he got the much better game. He won a pawn and probably had some clearly winning chances, but he failed to make the most of them, and the game was eventually drawn. But here Anand does not even allow the main line there is castles, as in game 4. But here Anand bypasses that in favor of d3. Again, that's a slower line. That's a way of completely avoiding the Berlin, but it also allows black to play actively. Bishop c5. That's probably the most active line for black. Develop your pieces. c3. Black castles, white castles. Rook e8. The idea of this move is D4, an early d4 is not an option for white because the e-pawn was hanging. There's too much pressure against the e-pawn. And also, too, this tends to discourage the lines with bishop takes c6 because black has just too much play here. So, anyway, rook e8, rook e6. These are all theoretically approved moves. Theoretically approved moves. And this is what, the grandmasters are currently playing. Rook e1, a6, bishop a4, b5, bishop to b3. Black plays d6. I think here black really likes the setup and can be very happy with the setup. Probably the only minus to black's setup is this move, bishop g5. Anand played all of his moves relatively quickly. Magnus Carlsen, in the video of this game, I watched it, he's already beginning to think. In fact, he's sunk into a fairly deep thought here. I'm not sure exactly how long he thought, 10 or 15, 20 minutes, something like that. But anyway, he's already thinking a bit. And as he begins to think, it becomes clear that Anand had this line prepared in advance, whereas Carlsen now is obviously he studied this line, but the fact is he hasn't prepared too much beyond this. So bishop g5 must have been something as a surprise to him. That I don't know why, because bishop g5 is one of the stronger lines there, one of the preferable options of the power book. Just to quickly explore different options there. Also, bishop e3 is another line that's played a lot, and that's another idea. And also, too, here a4 can be played by white, so that's another idea. And also, white plays h3 there. That's a very useful move because it stops bishop g4. But bishop g5 is an extremely logical idea, and black has no real problems here. Bishop e6. Now here, I think white should keep his dark light squared bishop on, his LSB on. And also the engine likes simply d4 here. And I've got to think that is absolutely the best move. Play gets very, very complicated, but it becomes very sharp. But d4 is a very good move. Bishop c2 might be a very good move. Anand doesn't either. He plays knight bd2 here. Now h6. This is to break the pin here. Bishop h4. Bishop takes b3. Now here, I think that probably in lieu of the fact that, Anand is trying to keep the position complicated. So he's going to take with the A pawn and try to put pressure up the half open A file. But I don't know if the double pawn is really worth it here. The engine strongly indicates that knight takes b3 is the best move for white. I like it a lot because it also hits the bishop on c5, black's bishop. A white knight on the b3 square after knight takes bishop. That knight's hitting the c5 bishop, and black doesn't want to allow double pawns there, so also most certainly going to have to move again. And, you know, white can play slow developing ideas like queen c2 and h3, rook e2, double his rooks on e-file, or maybe even queen c2, rook, you know, rook h3 and rook d1 and d4. He's got all kinds of different ideas there. So those are different things that white could have done there. But Anand played a takes b3, so that was one of the first critical points of the game for me. Knight b8, that's a very good move for Carlsen. Very practical move. You know, he's just going to, his g5 is probably not a good idea here for black because it invites sacks, and also the black king is just too open. And this bishop would need to be able to be transferred to the g7 square, and that's almost impossible in the current position because the bishop's locked out of the pawn structure up there on c5. So black's going to reinforce his knight on f6 with this knight bd7. h3, knight bd7, knight h2. b4 was probably the most straight up move here. White should have definitely played b4 because if nothing else, he gains a tempo with that. And after bishop b6 and knight f1, play is very similar to the game. White has these two very powerful outposts here, and black's pawn structure is permanently fixed. This almost certainly looks like a small improvement over the game. So anyway, knight h2, queen e7, knight df1, bishop b6, knight e3, queen e6. It still wasn't too late for you know, Anand to play b4, and that's why he goes ahead and does that now. But problem is now, as compared to the earlier lines, is black's pieces are on much more favorable squares, especially his queen on that very active e6 square. Black plays a5. He immediately undoubles, you know, gets rid of the pressure. In other words, he's not going to be left with that backward pawn the rest of the game. So a5, b takes a5, bishop takes a5, knight h to g4, bishop comes back to b6, bishop takes f6, knight takes f6, knight takes f6 check, queen takes f6. And now I got to label white's next move probably dubious. It may be not that bad, but it's just, and I know what Anand's thinking. He's thinking, I've got to get the point back. I've got to make something happen. But any advantage, according to the engines, the position is already equal. So, you know, the time for white to look for a deep advantage is long since past. If Anand's preparation didn't take all of this into an account, then basically he has to just chalk this up as a failure, and it's a little too late to try to make something out of this position. The correct move there is rook takes a8. Excuse me. Oh, sorry. The correct move there is just simply rook takes a8 followed by d4, and that's what the engines or queen e2. Either one of those ideas will give white complete equality. White plays queen g4. I got to label that a dubious because, you know, that he's going to allow double pawns. Bishop takes, f takes, queen e7, and those double pawns are going to haunt white for the rest of this game. He's not going to quite be able to undouble them, so that was a very doubtful idea. You know, if Anand thinks he's going to play this position to a win, then I think he's just dreaming. I think this is craziness here. It's still an interesting position. White has some chances because of his open files. Against a much weaker player, he might have been able to pull it off, but against Carlsen, it's not going to happen. Rook f1, c5, king h2, c4, d4, rook takes a1, rook takes a1, queen to b7, he hits the e4 pawn, rook d1, queen c6. Now here comes another maybe faulty move by Anand. Here, according to the engines, he has to play rook e1, and I've looked at this with Fritz and Houdini and Ripka and all that good stuff. And almost 30 here, rook e1, Fritz 13 says that's got to be the best move, and I have to agree with that. That positively, absolutely looks like the indicated move here for white. I can't see White making hay out of this position. Looks like he almost has to play rook e1 here. Instead, he goes queen f5. The move he actually plays is queen f5. And again, another slightly doubtful move, because now Carlsen exchanges, and White's left with this permanently ugly set of double pawns, isolated pawns on the e file. Maybe it's not a loss with correct play, but it just looks so ugly. Rook to e5, queen f3, queen c7, king h1. I might have played king g1 there. There's something to be said for transferring this king, bringing this king around, so you can maybe defend. Excuse me. So you can defend your weaknesses in an endgame. Anyway, but king h1, queen e7, queen g4, king h7. Now White's got to think about very solidly about making a draw. I mean, it's up to Carlsen to prove that he can break in. All the engines are a clear advantage for Black, but I'm not so sure it's that easy. Maybe you just march the king over to f2 and maybe even put it on e2, you know, long term or something like that. I'm not sure, but, you know, White's got to do something. He's got to come up with some kind of active defensive idea, or at least try to cover all of his weaknesses. Instead, he just, you know, sort of content to move pieces back and forth. Queen f4, g6, king h2, king g7, queen f3, rook e6. Now, this move here is, you know, I got to think it's a mistake. I mean, it's got to be a miscalculation of some kind. Anand plays queen g3, and I don't see any point to this move, and neither do any of the engines. So I have to label this as simply a miscalculation of some type. Why not just queen f4 and continue to repeat the position? I mean, I just don't understand this move at all. Also, to it, queen f4 keeps the, I apologize, queen f4 keeps the Black d-pawn under surveillance, so Black can't get too froggy with his queen or rook. Moving his queen away will drop the d-pawn, and then White would have enough counterplay in that position to draw. So queen g3's got to be just another error or miscalculation or something there. Rook e4. Now Carlsen is probably just a pawn up. Queen takes d6, rook takes c3, queen takes rook b5, rook b7, rook d6. Now, according to the experts in this endgame, I've talked to a couple of titled players and sent them emails, and they said they honestly thought that this game, despite White's extra pawn, should have been a draw because of the fact that White has an extremely active rook, and he can simply just march his king in the center. And Black's rook's going to be kind of tied down for a long time because of it'll either have to defend. Rook has to stay behind to defend his b pawn or c pawn. If he shoves his b pawn forward too soon, White just plays rook c6 and wins the c pawn. So it's not that easy to play Black's position. So objectively, with best play, this pawn down endgame should probably be a draw for White. But you know, Anand just doesn't manage to hold it now. f6, h4. Give that move an exclam. The idea is simply to play h5 there. Carlsen either totally overlooked this idea or just simply grossly underestimated it, because he played king f7. That move's got to be, one grandmaster said that's a question mark. I have to agree there. The correct move there was simply h5. And White has Black has all kinds of ideas now. And, you know, White king g3, rook e7, and maybe the king penetrates down to the Black rook penetrates down to e2. So, you know, it's going to be a very wild game, but h5 was definitely the move. For whatever reason, Carlsen played king f7, and now Anand plays h5. That was a very brilliant move. It's a sack to bust up the pawns. G takes h5, rook d5, king g6, king g3. And even though Carlsen's 2 pawns up here, Black is 2 pawns up, technically this should be an unwinnable endgame. Again, I've talked to a few of the experts on this endgame. I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Black pawns and 2 pieces, so that's 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's absolutely no table base I know of with 12 pieces. That's just too many pieces for any computer to calculate. However, the experts, grandmasters, and there's a very similar endgame to this in one of my rook and pawn endgame books, and it's basically the same idea. White had busted pawns. He had a doubled f pawn and a doubled f pawn and an isolated h pawn in that game, but otherwise it was very similar. Black's pawns were backed up a little bit, But in that game, you know, the weaker side was able to hold the draw. So it technically this should be a draw in endgame, but again, Anand just doesn't. He messes up somewhere along the way. Rook b6, rook c5. Again, keeping the white rook as active as possible. f5, king h4. There's a lot to be said for king f4. In fact, that's the first move of Fritz. That's going to force black to either defend or give up his f pawn, and I think that should have been thought that was Anand's whole initial concept. For whatever reason here, Anand plays king h4. I think maybe he's just getting tired. He said that after the loss in game 5, he had great difficulty sleeping. He wasn't able to sleep much at all. So maybe he was just tired, and you know his things begin to break down when you're really, really tired. But anyway, king f4 was certainly the correct move. All the engines indicate that that's the indicated move, and that would have forced black to either, defend his pawn or give it up. And if he plays rook f6, then rook takes this pawn. So, king f4 certainly looked like the move, and that would have been the logical follow-up to the h5 idea. Instead, he plays king h4, rook e6, rook takes b5, rook e4 check, king h3, king g5, rook b8, h4, rook g8 check. I guess that's one idea there. King h5, rook f8, rook f4, rook c8, rook g4, rook f8, rook g3 check, king h2, king g5. Probably the position seems to be almost level according to the evaluation of Fritz 13, and I've run through this in game with a couple of the other engines as well, and they all reached a similar conclusion here. Rook g8 check, king f4, rook c8 attacking the only pawn, king e3, rook takes c4. Now white's got it's 3-3. Carlsen seemed to be under the opinion that he was winning here. I watched the post again. If you don't believe me, all you have to do is watch the post game video conference, and they asked questions and stuff. And Carlsen seemed to indicate that black was winning here because his pawns were coming just too quickly. But it's 6, 1, 2, 3, 4. We got 5, and 5, 10. I don't think there's a 10-piece table base yet, but again, this is 3-on-3, and I think that I have an endgame book, and there's a very similar ending in that book. It's with colors reversed, but it's very similar. All the pawns on one side and one pawn on the other, a B pawn, and it's so highly similar to this. I can't help but believe, and in that endgame they analyze it out to a draw as well. So I've got to believe here that this position is a draw. That's supported by the Fritz 13 engine that I'm currently running. I've also run Ribka and Houdini on this, and Deep Shredder on this end game. So this has got to be a drawn position, and that's what the engine seemed to be indicating. Fritz is saying it's dead level here. It's showing minus 0.005. I mean, that's like 5/100ths of a pawn. You can't possibly even come close to winning an end game with that kind of advantage. So it's just not winnable. And I've used sliding. I've analyzed lines 10 or 15 moves deep and not found anything approaching a win. But as I was saying, the correct move here for white has got to be, well, anyway, this has got to be a drawn endgame. Magnus Carlsen seemed to be indicating that he thought that this was a win for white, but a win for black rather, but that does not seem to be the case. But anyway, we'll proceed with the game. F4. Now we're going to come up to the real stinker, in my opinion. And again, I wasn't the first to discover this. I was following the end of this game with an engine one morning. But B4 is definitely the indicated move. It's what Fritz 13 wants to play, and it's what Deep Shredder wants to play. I did an overnight analysis with that. spent many hours, letting the computer run all by itself, a DPA, and came back and used slid back and forth and looked at this endgame. But rook b4, in fact, we'll just explore that a little quick. Rather, not rook b4, b4. b4 is the indicated move. And now we'll just quickly look at what Fritz says is the best moves here. h3, I believe, if I remember correctly, these are all the same moves that a lot of other grandmasters came up with. Rook g6, rook c8 or rook c7. You can play probably either one. Fritz has wanted to play rook c7, we'll go with that. f3, rook e7 check, king to d2, rook f7, rook g2 check, king h1, king e3, b5, he wants to play rook g6 here. I was wondering rook b2 maintaining the mating web might be a little stronger. I guess it doesn't matter. If you're going to try to create a mating web, if we had one more pawn on the board, black had a pawn on g5, he could march his king over to g3 and actually create a mating web on the white king to put the king under duress. But it's not, I've already looked at this deeply with an engine and analyzed it a lot, tried to come up with some winning attempts for either side. But anyway, rook g6 seems to be the indicated move. Rook e7 check, king d3, rook f7, king e2, rook e7 check, king d3. Well, rook f7, that's just a draw by repetition. I mean, we're just going back and forth now. So, that's just one possible line. The Grandmaster on ICC, Internet Chess Club, I believe you can get their analysis for free, or at least it's online on the ICC website. You may have to join to see that analysis. And also, I think there's some analysis on chess.com by a famous player, and there's also the analysis, I'm sure, the ChessBase analysis on the ChessBase website. You can download that for free. So, b4 definitely seems to indicate, and that's what all the other grandmasters and titled players are indicating, that b4 would have drawn there for white, and that this move, rook a4, may be the ultimate culprit. This is where Anand really lost the game. b4 would have won. Again, I watched the post-game video conference, and Carlsen seemed to indicate that he's already winning, but that does not seem to be the case. The engine clearly seems to be showing here that the game should have been drawn with correct play if white would have played 60 b4 there. But he played rook a4. That was probably, in all likelihood, the losing move. The engines see right away a big change in the evaluations, and here's the problem: is things get worse the further down you go. h3 was the correct move. She takes h3. And now black plays rook g6. That's a pretty good move there too, but the move that would have really helped a lot would have been the one that Fritz likes, is king f3, which is also an interesting move there too. But rook g6 is the most practical idea there. The idea is just simply to ram the king pawn home. And now I think now it's seeing it. Maybe rook g6 is an exclam. Maybe Carlsen's move, his technique is better than that of the engines, and that's very possible. It's one thing the engines still fall behind on. There's two areas, just so you should know, that engines do not excel in, and that is close positions where strategy, long-range planning takes precedence over pure calculation. They don't do well in those type of positions. They don't do well in certain types of endgames. And there's several other places where an engine doesn't do well in. Certain forced combinations, I mean, if they're really long, I can show you some problems like mate and 17 and stuff, where the engines fail to find the best ideas, at least initially. But, really long tactical sequences, they sometimes don't. They'll find a win, but maybe necessarily not the best one. But anyway, rook g6 is a good move there, and the engine is now showing that black is winning here. So again, probably the losing move for Anand was 60, rook a4. You could give that a question mark or even 2 question marks. b4 would have probably drawn the game without too many problems. c4. The move c4 wasn't so good either. All the engines like getting the white rook more active, either rook a5 or rook a8, something along those lines. and for whatever reason, Anand plays c4. That was not a good move. f3. Now the black f pawn is just much too fast, and all the engines here at this particular point, after black's 60-second move of f3, they correctly conclude that white is quite lost, simply because that pawn's going to run in, and the big problem is this b pawn. This b pawn on b2 is blocking a check. Without it, this game might have been drawn. Similar position without the b pawn. I tried that, was drawn, but because the king can go to e2 and white can't immediately check with the b pawn, that means this black's f pawn is going to promote. Going to cost white an entire rook. So anyway, c4, f3, rook a3 check, king e2, b4, f2, rook a2 check, king f3, rook a3 check, king f4. And now the problem is that that he simply can't stop the pawn from promoting. And he played rook a8 there. What was wrong with? I guess if rook a1, we'll just look at that briefly. Yeah, I guess Carlsen just can play rook e6. Oh yes, and if king g2, simply rook e1, and that should be winning quite. See if that's correct. Rook a1, rook e6, and if king g2, yes, just simply rook e1. And now if you exchange rooks, you make a queen. You can't. That's the problem, is you can't exchange rooks. King takes pawn, rook takes pawn, and this rook and king can stop these two connected passers. So that's a relatively easily win. So that would have pretty much done it. But anyway, in this position, after king f4, Anand played rook a8, and then after rook g1, he's guaranteed to promote his pawn. And in this position, after the check, white's got a couple of checks. He can play check, king e3, check again, king d4, and if he checks one more time, the black king just eats all the pawns, and sooner or later the rook has to come back, and he's going to promote a pawn, and that rook's going to cost white his rook. That black f pawn is going to cost white a rook. Here Anand, I believe, resigned. That was the end of the game. Yes, that was the end of the game. 67 rook g1 was Anand's last move, and apparently, Carlsen's last move. And here, rather than make his 68th move, Anand resigned. That pretty much does it for my analysis of this game. I apologize, this game ran a little long. It was much more complex than I originally thought, and I didn't want to gloss over. I wanted to be able to try to highlight what I believe some of the bad moves, and also just some of the strategical ideas there, because I felt that was extremely important. Again, many of these ideas are not my own. I freely admit that I've already looked at the online analysis of many of the other masters and analyzed this game both with engines and looked at other people's observations and stuff. And a lot of this is based purely on the engine. If you've got any experience following the engine, a lot of times and if you're a fairly strong player, you can just simply follow the engine along. And a lot of masters, again, will say the same things because they're looking at the same things I'm looking at. They're looking at the engine. But anyway, that pretty much concludes my coverage of the video for this game. Thank you for watching my video. If you enjoy the videos and you'd like to make a contribution to the websites, to my websites and to my video building efforts, etc., please go to the PayPal website. That's www.paypal.com, and make a contribution under my email address, which is LifeMasterAJ@yahoo.com. Thanks for watching my video, and have a great day.